Fight it then. Fight it with all.
Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. And I do appreciate you joining us tonight. I'm right here with Ransom Godwin on this beautiful blue planet spinning through spiral arm of our galaxy. What a blessed time to be here, coming into the end of the year. Now, what could we expect for the next year? Well, where should we start tonight, Ransom? I'm almost afraid to walk on pins and needles through the broadcast here, because it does appear we're about to repeat 2020 in a way more amplified fashion than we just have come out of. It could be from the white lung. It could be from the amplified magnetic fields, and we just got a taste of that with the super freeze. So many things happening electromagnetically. Now the finance is changing. There's an uptick in provocation in Europe. Not about Ukraine, okay, but then I'm talking about Kosovo. And having traveled over in Croatia and Slovenia, that is very fresh in everybody's minds right there. They had 20 years of peace plus, good 20 years, but it does seem that things move in cycles. Also, if anybody's been following the rescue of 1,700 tourists out of Petra in Jordan, where they received 6 months worth of rain in a few hours in a storm, and everybody was down in the wadis, or the very small, tiny, compressed valleys, and they were flooded, so they had to come in with different types of pickup trucks and military gear and come in and get them out of there. The river, or what was walking path, turned into a river. So many things happening. I don't know, Ransom, what are you seeing on the front for 2023? My dogs are going crazy tonight. There's something out in the forest. We got coyotes over here. We got a screeching something over there. And the stars are out. And just this last week, you could see all the planets move through the ecliptic. If you stayed out long enough, you could watch them go in unison, one after the other. Even Neptune, which I couldn't see because I forgot my binoculars. I was just too enthralled sitting out there naked eye. But the blue comet is also visible in the sky. It should be naked eye from tomorrow through maybe the 5th of July as it makes perihelion. No, it's a blue comet, not large like the blue star Caccina, but nonetheless, naked eye comet right now. So these are the things on my mind, Ransom. I appreciate you joining me to smooth out the rest of the year and then possibly put in a predictive model for what we see coming up in 2023. Oh, it'd be nice if I added him, wouldn't it? I guess I was in a hurry to get on the show tonight. Ransom, how could I leave you out of the conversation? Welcome. Okay, studio delay. Ransom, you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, there we go. Connected. We love high tech, don't we? Connectivity.
Right. Yeah, I was listening to you on the radio anyway, so clear broadcast.
What does 2023 hold? I'm actually, after today talking with Paul, I sit here and go, oh my, are we going to go through this again? This seems like the real one for me here. I really got a bad feeling, man. Ransom, when I came back that first time and I was talking to you and Rex and we had those interviews and I was like, dude, we just got weeks before this thing tidal waves on us. This is like the same, but at a level 9 above that. Like really, it's about 9 times more voracious and faster spreading, and tolls on everything about a 9x compared to what we just experienced. I don't know. This is a game changer here.
It looks like it might be. I mean, I'm watching some of Paul the other day, and I'm a little below what he was talking about. Plus, I've missed a lot of his discussion because it's an ongoing discussion every day on his channel. I catch it sometimes. But from the last one I was watching, if I interpreted it right, it seems like there's a major planned wave coming our way. And if you see the headlines, right now you see all of a sudden there's millions of people coming from certain areas that supposedly just got infected. Now we'll see if that turns out to be right, because you know how headlines twist narratives to scare people. So I don't know exactly what that is, but they're already requiring checks on this side for people coming from China. And man, I've been paying attention to bits and pieces, through some of the same sources probably you are on Twitter, and you probably have more than I do. And I'm just watching it through, the American social media lens. And, it barely anything's leaking out. If you notice that the amount of media coming out of China right after the tanks rolled out dropped dramatically. Matter of fact, the following days after I saw tanks in the streets, the internet was flooded with Chinese pornography. And they knew that was a real tactical move to keep people distracted away from these other things leaking out. So they just clogged the internet with this, whatever you want to call it, entertainment distraction. And they did that. And then all of a sudden the media of what was going on just shut up. But there still are some outlets, and I'm watching people diving off buildings because they just don't want to go through more of what they've been going through. I've been seeing just crazy amounts of things that only the imagination of a sci-fi writer up until about 2019 could get away with projecting a story. No one would say that was, everybody would say that's nonsense, but I've been seeing it in real time. And I do think that, and if you remember, it was a couple years ago, last year, and again this year, I've been predicting in my thoughts of like how devious I think that the elite are. And this is just my opinion, but I think they're very super intelligent groups of think tank people, and they don't do things on accident. So, whenever I see a big old debate about whether or not you should be medicated or not, and then the conspiracy theorist turns out to be a lot more accurate than the official narrative and authoritative sources of media are. And I predicted that, it wouldn't be smart to just have one that really didn't do nothing, and then the next one went around and it was deadly, and then it would catch all those people that don't want to participate in what was obviously a science experiment. I hope I can get away with saying that much. But yeah, in the backdrop of this, of course, we've been watching all of the other things going on. And I hate to say I told you so, so I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say I told you so, but I did mention it. What was going to happen as soon as the blizzard conditions started hitting areas. And was I not right? There was looting. People were taking stuff that they wanted, not necessities, because they did an inventory of most of the places looted around Buffalo, New York. And it was non-essential. So the people were just grabbing and robbing, and they're doing that in a position of not needing yet. So you imagine what it's going to be like when there's a need. And you remember, I know you brought up this a couple of times, but you were predicting that in the near future they might have military-style checkpoints at the front of food places. Well, what do you think is going to happen if utter chaos every time it snows happens? Well, of course they're going to put police presence, and it's hard to argue that our police forces are not militarized. So that is exactly the prediction that you gave there. And then what happens when the supplies run out? Because I just went to the grocery store right now. No organic food. Absolutely no organic eggs, cheese, milk, the essentials. What you have left is there, but it's, I guess that's your opinion on the quality of those products. However, those products are skyrocketing in price. Eggs skyrocketing, milk skyrocketing, cheese, all of your food items, meat, everything. At the same time, if they're telling you in the background, get ready to eat bugs, get ready to be a cannibal. In Europe, people are sitting there freezing in their apartments. It's the exact prediction of the climate lockdown, but they're just using the virus model, so to speak. You see all these power plants shutting down in Europe, coal coal, nuclear, and now you got people freezing. And next comes starvation and war. And, it's obvious that they're doing that on every single angle. You see people around the world, governments dumping money into this money laundering war scheme, the theater of war there in Ukraine. And I only see that turning into what it is, which is kind of a theatrical war, so to speak. And I'm not saying people are not suffering on either side or dying on either side. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's theatrical in the way that it's planned, the way that it's being shown to the world in this little lens where they cut out any other factoids that you don't want to, they don't want to tell you about because they're inconvenient. Put it that way. That's going on, but it's soon going to turn into real deal fighting. And what I mean by that is over the past 10 years, they've shatter belted the entirety of Europe. And I bring that term up. I learned that in school. It might have been just a term from the teacher that was giving it to me. I'm not sure. But the shatter belt all through there were all these ethnic differences, historical differences, political alignments are different. And now you've influxed it with a bunch more new populations of different ethnics. And what I'm saying basically is there's so many different groups of people, they're going to be fighting over the resources. And we already see this happening when it's not that big a deal. I know if you've been keeping your eye on France, good God, the whole of Europe is about to turn, in my opinion, communist to save them from the situation that they're about to go through, which is a bunch of infighting all through Europe and Eurasia over food, energy, resources, etc. And then over here in the United States, did I not talk about that our infrastructure, our power grid is a joke? And what happened? One little Arctic blast comes in, everything turns upside down. No traveling. The first time I ever heard of a travel ban. So the government's already trying to enforce this idea that they could tell you to stay in your homes regardless of your situation. So what if you ain't got no food and you don't have any resources and you venture out? So they're going to throw you in jail for that. And with attitudes from the government like that, people might as well loot. Of course they will, which furthers along the process of destabilization. So that's what's happening right now. We're being destabilized. Europe's being destabilized. China is being destabilized from the inside. Obviously, they're going in a weird direction right now. The whole world is a basket case of craziness right now. So all you need to do to get everything back in order is, of course, like they do always, is the problem, reaction, solution. They cause the problem. They wait for our reaction. Then they offer a solution. The solution is always giving up your independence, your rights. And I think those terms get kind of overused. But basically what I'm talking about is your ability to move about in the human domain as a free human is ending. And they're going to be using all of these little scenarios that they're causing to enforce these rules. And it's boggling to the mind that people are just still sitting back and watching it, hoping it's going to move for the better. And we're beyond that point. So if people don't start changing their local areas, it's kind of a lost cause because they're going to be throwing these new mandates, new rules. And I think it's all because they know that they've been getting everybody the wrong propaganda for, 20 years now, telling them they're all going to die in a burning world. And it seems like it's going to be a freezing world. And, the sun's activity might just wipe off every little bit of technology we have in the near future. And I think that they know that we're in that time that all of these possibilities increase in odds. And that's why they're giving us as much chaotic destabilization as possible. Just everywhere I look, it's not positive news unless I just turn off all media and be a caveman and go out here and, pick up all my seeds that are left. And my thought for this spring is that I'm going to try to do everything in my power to grow as much food as possible, because I think that just being an example for people around me and showing them that you don't have to depend on these, matrix style enforcement of food and power and all of this stuff. You can get out of it. It just takes a little bit of work, and kind of that's what we're preaching. But I don't know, with the way things are going, how many people are going to come out the other end. And I had this weird idea I brought it to you before, just kind of joking around. We were joking around about the Mad Max movie and how they were kind of grabbing people for blood bags and whatnot. And it made me start thinking, I'm O negative. I'm only 7% of the world's population, which gave me a weird idea to go ahead and divide that into the world's population. And it came out to about 500 million at the time. Now we're just at the point where we're at 8 billion people on the planet. And this same time space is also when they destroyed those Georgia Guidestones. And I don't think that was a joke. I think that was a warning. That was just like we always talk about. They have to tell you before they do it. So I think that was there for some period of time for anybody that wanted to look, kind of like the Masonic way. You have to ask to find out. So you could have went and looked at that. But now that we hit 8 billion, they took that warning down. And what is 7% of 8 billion? And forget about the blood type thing. Just 7% of 8 billion, period, is what is
560 million.
Exactly. So you're right on the mark. So if you lose another 60 here and there for whatever program you got going on, it seems to weirdly round out right about that same number. And then when you combine that idea with their Agenda 30 plans and all of these other things, you could tell that they plan on clearing out big swaths of civilization where you're not supposed to live there. And then at the same time, squeezing everybody into these cities that don't have power, don't have food, and have all this crime going on if everybody's stealing from everybody, which will further increase the destability of our civilization as far as from our point of view. From their point of view, it's all getting everything in order for their reset. This is all an order out of chaos, like they like to say. That's one of their big sayings, right? Order out of chaos. And that's exactly what they're doing, this problem reaction solution. They're throwing all the problems at us right now so they could give us their version of the solutions.
It's a hefty basket of goodies there, Santa. Thank you so much for that. Coal and cow dung, thanks. Appreciate it. Well, at least I could burn it in my furnace to keep my family warm. I should be saying, thank you, Santa. You got to look at it in a different way, right? It's all about reframing. Because as I sit here today, and this is a no BS assessment, Ransom and I talked about this exactly a week ago on the show, that this storm was coming in and it was going to be something ferocious. And I was going outside exactly a week ago after this program, and I bundled up like I was an Arctic explorer. And I was looking for that energy front, that literal energy front, preceding that about a 2-minute window of electrical activity embedded in the atmosphere. So I went outside to check that out. There was definitely messaging in there. If you were really just letting your mind go, you could feel that the earth was saying something. It was touching. It was exploring new areas, if you will. There was definitely something heavy in that. And I'm going to say very, very heavy energy. Now, I don't know how many people stayed out in the front. I'm just one of those guys. But this thing with the white lung that's coming, like we told you to get ready last week, the temperature was going to drop, and it dropped the most ever recorded in a 1-hour period. Ever recorded, ever, anywhere on the planet, ever. Was this storm dropped the fastest in a single hour, ever recorded in human history, any point on the planet, ever. That was this storm that came through North America and wiped out a huge amount of the winter wheat. And then we also were saying, look out for these giant waves being generated over on the Great Lakes that were going to push up massive snowstorms in the regular snow belts. I mean, you got to look at some of these images coming out of Buffalo. I mean, it's really like day after tomorrow kind of stuff. You can't even see the cars when they're on a highway. They're buried 6-7 feet deep. But the same thing's happening in Japan. What's happening in Buffalo, just 2.0 in Japan, across a huge swath of Japan, to the point where their emergency crews can't even get there, so paralyzed too. 7 feet of snow in this storm for Japan. And then they had 6 feet of snow just last week. So in all, they have 13 to 14 feet of snow in less than 2 weeks there. Like, these are things that are just, wait a minute, not making sense any longer. I look out at this thing and go, all right, China. They have the thing called white lung coming out. It's a new, I guess, part of, but it's not the same. It's something entirely different. So we've run all the way to the end of what we understand as the vid. It's there, but it has a stopping point now. We're turning a page onto a new chapter. This new chapter is comprised of something completely different. With somebody I talked to today with an R20, an R18 to an R20 factor on it. You know, the vid was like an R6. This one's like an R18 to an R20, spreading 9 times faster. And so it's more like cotton candy in the lungs. This is going to sweep across the planet again in such a fashion that we're already depleted and demoralized, and you just medical and whatever. After the first, we're almost at 3 years now. It's depleted everywhere across the planet, and now there's something that's incredibly much stronger coming immediately. So if you're listening to these words, you're going to need to really go get some food and things. It's going to completely wreck this society for a minute or 2 or 10. Because you said people are going to be thinking about growing as much food as they can. That's the message after this thing starts to happen. And there won't be any deliveries to the supermarkets, just literally because there won't be enough people to work anymore. They'll all be sick and waiting for care. The problem is the same thing I'm describing to you has already swept through China in the last 45 to 50, 60 days, to the point where nothing's working. All their logistics are stopped. There's boxes. They can't even get foods into the supermarkets. You're looking at ghost towns. I mean, literally a third of the population is incapacitated at least right now by this thing. At least a third of the population. They were looking like 460 some million people today that literally couldn't lift a finger or responsible for somebody else's care. It would really, a third of the society is just involved in this thing to the point that nothing else matters for them except this. What about the farming implements and the tools and the shovels and the rakes? That all comes from China, but that is ceasing right now. It's not coming. Looking at these images, and again, Jennifer Zeng is who you want to go check. Z-E-N-G, Jennifer Zeng. And others that we're following through. They're going down the streets in China, and there's nobody on the streets. It literally looks like a ghost town. Well, if you have a third of the populace there incapacitated, it reminds me of when I was doing some research on the grand solar minimum. It's called the Sporer minimum. It was in the 1400s during one of the bouts of the bubonic plague. Now, this occurred in central England, not London area, central England, a little bit different locale. English are meticulous about their record keeping. But during that period of time, they switched from raising cattle into raising sheep and goat as the predominant animal species. It became a feed, an animal feed issue. But at the same time, it was a human food issue because they were in the middle of a light version of grand solar minimum in the cooling, just like we're in now, right now, in the very beginning of this cycle, onsetting, that it disrupted food production. So they went to smaller animals. But then along through the chart, there's a drop out of data for 10 years. There was not enough people to even keep data and records at what you consider government offices or any kind of statistics. There just wasn't enough people to do that. So there's a blank in the record. A blank. The only reason you even know what went on during that time is because the monks, the number and cases of candles that they ordered for the funerary rites gave an indication of what the mortality was at that time. Otherwise, there were no other written records kept for more than 10 years in England. Now, that's hard to believe, super hard to believe. You know, the meticulousness. You talk about Spanish Navy as well, like that kind of meticulous. Think about the Spanish Navy in the 1500s, what their logs were like. Geez, it would blow away one of our supercomputers today. It's so meticulous and well kept and tripled and backups to backups on ships. And, English were very much the same way. So I'm looking at what dropped out in the society of the apex of a civilization at that point, to the point where there are no records. Nobody went to work, no records, nothing. And then we're seeing the very same thing happen in China right as we speak this second. And that's whatever you want to call it, white lung that is now out in the world is going to be spreading around the planet again. So one thing I could say is, Ransom, you're talking about the lack of organics, vegetables. Well, if anybody's out there, you're going to need to boost your immune system immediately, as fast as you can. If that would be a priority amongst priorities of all the variables that we can see that you could possibly take action to do, boosting your immune system with more vitamins, minerals, whatever you do for your food, your diet, fruits, veggies, whatever, to get it up so you have that little extra edge over. I can't describe really what it is inbound. It's something it's gonna change the world 10x more than what the COVID did. And it's hard to frame a reference in that. But what if the banking system collapses and then they're like, okay, see, everybody was thinking there'd be a big collapse or he'd be forced to, or they'd confiscate it from the bank. What if this white lung rolls across the planet, does the same thing it did in the 1400s? Nobody's going to work, everything collapses, and then they just start moving over to a digital currency because they have to. And then with Starlink, you could still broadcast transactions to the satellite network. It'd be more of a regionalized or more of a decentralized type of system that would work, where there were people still working, surviving, that had electricity through this time, that it would go digital. The assets could be traded at that point, because the way it was looked at in the 1400s, there was no more letters of credit. Those things had ceased. Like all the business transactions during that time, there were none, and none that were before that time were honored after. It's just a strange chapter in history that seems to be repeating, but it's going into China. And really, this thing that I'm seeing. So when I came back from China that first time, and I was traveling, and I got the whole long story, and it was such a weird time. I was traveling over in the Czech Republic. I was supposed to fly back through Xi'an to go back over to Taipei. And they canceled all the flights through China, so we had to come back through Singapore and then go up. That was the beginning of it, of what I had seen in the whole epoch chapter of getting back to the States 3 weeks before it arrived from over in Asia specifically, and being ahead of it to the point it was not even in our news yet at all. Zero. Nobody was even talking about, nothing. It was zero. And I came back from being diverted flight and seeing this thing with all these videos and things coming out firsthand over there, and getting back here, and there's zero. All the rubbing alcohol was there. All the face masks were there. Everything was in the shops. Nothing was at all gone. It was unbelievable. And I came back here and I was telling those people, dude, this thing's serious. You got to see this. Really, it's going to roll over the planet. This thing, you got to get ready for this thing. And they thought I was insane, really. When I got back to the fervor, I was like a shipwreck victim that just got rescued. And I was like, this thing is here. It's real. It's coming. You got to get ready for this. And, no. American medical system's the best in the world. What are you talking about? You just And then when that thing hit like the tidal wave, I don't know if they were scared of me or if they just couldn't accept what happened. Or whatever. But what knowing is the best way I could say it. The knowing of that event that hadn't played out around the rest of the world yet is now back again. 2.0, and very much more strong than it was in the first one. To the point that this is literally the thing that changes. We all thought everything else would be by force. That they would come and confiscate this. You were forced to do this. Your bank would be taken at that. The CBDCs, everything would be by force, because it would have to be, because nobody would accept that kind of change that quickly, which the WEF would want to push on everybody. But if this white lung is allowed to roll free and get into every country, because China just sent out a huge amount of airplanes again, just like they did the first time, landing over Milan and cruising around Australia, getting over to the States. Wait a minute, you just need a negative test. The way it goes is saying they're issuing false negative test results to put the people on the planes to get them out. Because they're using it under the guise that people want to go to for holiday. So we saw the same exact ploy last time. Planes went out around the world after the, the military games, and whoosh, then it started. Well, it took quite some time because everybody's medical systems were completely, fully well stocked, completely to the hilt, where they had extra because they never had anything happen like this before. So there was extra upon extra. And there was extra staff, and the supply chains were fully functional, and everything was completely functional at that time. Remember that? When you could dial up and you could look at Airbnb and get on a flight and be there in about, a day or so and hop in an Uber and then get to your place. Remember those days just a few years ago? Fully functional to now we sit here at completely dysfunctional, rundown, broken, scarce medical supplies around as we sit in any hospital or anywhere you go to. Things are scarce. Especially, like, in the United States, we have it really good here. But the rest of a lot of places, I'm not going to say all, but many around the planet are very lean on supplies at the moment. And when this thing hits, I just know we're not ready. But the thing is, how do you weave through this? That you got to know this is coming. So somebody said last time, well, why, talking about a negative event, are you manifesting that? It's like, not really. It's already out there. I'm not. But what's the best way to, move through this? So that something stronger is coming, thicker, more encompassing. It's going to involve more resources and more people this time. And when I say people, I could be talking about sort of in the industry, medical industry itself, but I'm talking about the amount of people I see in China just trying to deal with that amount of passing of people. Is overwhelmed the system to the point where it's literally impossible to believe what you're seeing with the numbers. It's really it's staggering beyond belief. Where I'm shell shocked looking at this by the end of day. Like, it takes so many people after somebody passes with that thing, this white lung, to actually get that physical being to another place to get disposed of. Religious rites, funerary rites, and then the actual, you have a physical substance in front of you. They're so overwhelmed that there are lines stretching miles down from the places, the crematoriums, in order to get in. And they're cranking through like 4,500 a day, but they're still 12 days backed up on a single facility, example one, out of thousands that are experiencing the same thing. And I'm sitting here going, you know what? It was not like that in 1.0. Definitely not even close. This was going to take a lot more manpower and people. So you could see there were family members there, 2 to 3, 4, 5 family members with each passed person, to the point that nothing else mattered in the society except taking care of that most important, what you consider right now. But reading the accounts in the 1400s, there was a point that was reached where that became so common that it was insignificant at the end of the full running of the course of this, whatever it is. Back then it was bubonic. Right now it seems to be white lung. It's inbound. It's coming ferociously fast. I think we're completely unprepared like we were in the beginning of 2020, unless you'd seen it come out of Asia. The stoppage of everything coming out of China is another thing to contend with and think about. Those supplies that we would use for gardening and simple tasks to get our daily homes repaired, or a lot of people get things from China. We're too reliant on it. Almost everything's coming out of China that we need for our daily lives. Home repair, any kind of repair, car parts, anything you can imagine coming from China. That's all stopping. Not that it was bad enough anyway with the inflation and these sort of things, trade war and embargoes and export embargoes, these sort of things. But we sit to a civilization-changing event here. Magnetic field, I was talking with Paul Cottrell today, and we were talking about magnetic fields on possible wave spikes. So knowing that the gas giants are lining up in the outer solar system coming into their quadrant, max intensity on the magnetic field would be October 2024. There's going to be a couple steps in between, like there were last year. We came through what they call a magnetic window. As this thing intensifies in the outer solar system, there's these points where it's not fully aligned out there yet, but the Earth passes through a much more magnetically intensified sector, a quadrant, until it passes out of there, because those those four gas giants are only creating a magnetic field in one quadrant of the solar system. It's not like the entire solar system's affected because all the planets are out in just one single quadrant. So once we slide through that center of that quadrant, we get into this magnetic field intensity where you saw the volcanic eruptions of Hunga Tonga, the larger earthquakes last year. That's in the same window. So we were thinking today that, it's very possible that that magnetic field also would involve a peak of this new as well, this white lung, because we were looking back at the peaks before and they seem to occur on magnetic field coupling. But you have to know where your solar geometry, your solar, where the orbits are for these planets and geocentricities. So Ransom, I don't know, man. I'm sorry I rambled a little long there, but you started those thoughts with that big basket of goodies that you gave me.
Right. I was kind of skidding through the articles when I'm listening to this, and I was showing the audience, just like you were talking about how there was no paperwork and there was just all of these bodies kind of lined up for people to take care of. That's exactly what's happening in China right now. I was just showing the footage. The crematorias have people lined up like if it's Black Friday, no pun intended there, but they're lined up outside like they're waiting for a new iPhone, but they're not. They have their families' loved ones outside, just sitting on the ground with a little, the ceremonial blanket or sheet or whatever you call that on some of them. Here, I'll show that again. And it's just kind of terrifying. Can you imagine that it's got to the point where the people that work at these places are so busy that there's people just lined up outside? Over here, the government takes control of most bodies. It goes to the hospital, the coroner, then it goes to the people that take care of it, the undertaker, whatever. That doesn't seem to be happening here. I mean,
no, but Ransom, that's the thing. It used to be exactly the same there, exactly the same, but it's overwhelmed to the point where the people are now taking control of that because they have to.
Yeah, it's just too much stuff. So even the government is just letting them handle their own thing, which tells me that they kind of know that more of this is coming, in my opinion. And then you go back over here to the States, we get this one little storm. And you think it's ironic that all of these planes show up from China at the same time as the entire United States international airport system is completely in disarray, where people are going places, they can't get their luggage, they go back to the place. Like, I don't know how many thousands of flights got canceled over the thing. And then I was wondering if you heard about this. Let me see if I can find it. This was in Tennessee, basically where there were so many people asking for information that the police came out and threatened to arrest everybody if they just didn't leave and stop bugging the airport people that were in charge of it. Let me see if I can find that article. And then you got.
Can I tell you why, Ransom, while you look for that? There was a big draw on the grid here because they shut down a bunch of the power plants. And they had to go on rolling blackouts, so I had to get out the generator. And, we have these oil recirculating heaters, and I had to run those every 2 hours. We had 6 blackouts per day, so that was East Tennessee. But the thing was, they were sharing power with 7 other states. And that's ridiculous. And I'm curious what this whole thing is about. That's your right as a customer to keep asking, hey, man, when's my flight going to get rebooked? That's a simple question.
Right. Here it is. It's WKRN. BNA passenger records airport police officers threatening to arrest people. Evidently, they were just trying to find out about their flights. They're trying to find out about their baggage. But you see the whole system just collapses in one day. You got blackouts. You have crime. You have shut down interstates, roads. You have governments talking about travel bans, and we're not talking about travel bans because of sickness. We're talking about regular travel bans on snow that we've seen in the U.S. before. I mean, like some of these places like Buffalo. Are you telling me Buffalo doesn't know what to do when it storms? of course they do, and they've been dealing with it all of this time. But for some reason, they just stopped dealing with it when it happens. Like I remember, I think it was 2011. There was like a nor'easter thing, and I was living in Maryland, and they were calling it Snowmageddon, and it covered the whole East Coast all the way out into Tennessee with ice, snow, everything. I was like literally the only person on the road, like for I think from the east end of Tennessee all the way to DC. No one else out there, but I did see lots of snow plows and bulldozers and things like that. And when I got into DC, it looked like an apocalypse film. All the roads were shut. There was like 3 or 4 foot of snow just laying on the interstates. And what was weird about it is I saw all of these bulldozers and snow plows parked. They weren't doing anything. They were told to just sit there and let it pile up. And it didn't make any sense to me then. But now it's starting to kind of make sense where the government kind of purposely or according to them accidentally didn't know how to deal with stuff. And it was the same thing with the pandemic, if you remember. So if a pandemic comes in here and gets worse, you can imagine how they pile these problems on, and they use the other thing for blaming what's happening now. Like I'm sure that for weeks and months, the airlines will still be using this storm as a reason why they're having problems. But isn't it scary? You think about the police just ordering you to leave, or you'll be arrested over some information about your flight. Well, what if you're trying to get somewhere, or what if you're trying to get out of one of their little forced quarantine spots where they want to test you and stuff? How do you think the law enforcement's going to act to you then? And this is happening all over the world. It seems like I said last week, they purposely are shutting down the infrastructure, not only by order of the government, like I was talking about in Europe, where they're shutting down nuke plants, coal-fired power plants, etc. But over here in the U.S., let's look at the nice gift our government's going to give us on the first of the year, new taxes for everybody, and see if you don't see a pattern here. $6.5 billion of new taxes on natural gas for households. So that's your energy costs. $12 billion crude oil tax. Guess what? That's for your household and cars. $1.2 billion in coal tax, which will increase the household energy bills also. And then down here, when you can't pay all of these new bills that are coming in because everything's getting tax hiked and price hiked and turned off or made illegal. Down here, you have $74 billion worth of stock tax, which will hit your nest egg, 401ks, IRAs, pension plans, etc. So they're milking every little bit out of it. And after the pandemic, you remember how they were complaining. They made all these rules, and then nobody wanted to fly, and then they were complaining that they had empty stuff, and then finally they backed off of the masks, and they backed off a lot of stuff. They fall apart every time anything happens, and I think that's mainly because it's no longer private industry. It's no longer capitalism which runs things. I know they like to blame that. A lot of these people in charge around the world like to blame capitalism for what's going on, but actually capitalism is the only way out of the situations that they're creating. So they really are going after like everything that makes you a free human on this planet: travel, food, power. It is, without naming it, a fake climate lockdown. So I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, it's so obvious. They might not call it a climate lockdown at the end, but if storms are coming in that shouldn't be so much that the local government couldn't deal with it, but yet they're not, and then there's looting, and there's flights canceled, and you're losing all your property that you were trying to take with you. When I fly, I only take one bag on my backpack and one carry-on. I never put anything away because I know that there's a possibility of it getting stolen, broken, lost, etc. So you should pack light when traveling if you have to travel. And we even do a different thing because we go to Mexico to fly to Mexico, if that makes sense, because we don't want to come into the United States airport system, the Homeland Security. I don't want to get patted down and searched and have my medical history checked and all of these things that happen. It's a little inconvenience to cross the border and then get on a plane, but in the long run, it's way less intrusive. So there are little, loopholes still. But what happens when the airways are closed due to rising tensions. Like if you saw you were bringing up the military drill before. They're expanding their military drills out, and I'm talking about China and Russia, all the way to Guam, and they're kind of circling around Guam. And it won't be long before they're around, what is that, Diego Garcia, I think is the name of the other one. Anyway, they're taking the Pacific Ocean realm bit by bit, and I don't see how the United States is going to do anything about it, really. So what are we going to do, especially if we're dumping all our resources into Ukraine? For what purpose, I still have not figured out. I guess that's a little proxy war to try to weaken the Russian side of things. But China and Russia have made it clear that they're not going out like that. Basically, they've already made a deal that they will use each other to protect themselves against Western powers. So you could see that this conflict is going to kind of bulge up, and it's happening at the same time as everybody getting sick, as everybody starving. And think about that, the more disease that goes around when people are having trouble actually eating nutritious foods. If you can't find nutritious foods, if you're not growing them, they're not at the store. They do have the food-like stuffs down there that'll keep you, full. But how long is that going to last? If the main thing I think everybody's waiting on is for this digital dollar to take over when the fiat currency pops. And, people like Ron Paul have been talking about the inevitable end to the fiat currency, and which everybody knows it's a bunch of fakeness. It's a bunch of, loans and debts and derivatives and every other aspect of thing that could make the money actually not worth anything. So how fast do you think something like that could collapse if we just went to war and say, I don't know, the Suez Canal and some of the other ones got taken, and some of the trade routes in the ocean get shut down? You could see that everybody around the world could be suffering at the same time as far as products. On the good hand, maybe they'll realize that they don't need all of these little trinkets and toys that, facilitate the control mechanism that runs everybody and decides for them. I kind of wanted you to get into what is this, without getting in trouble, what is the white lung? Because I was watching him talk about it as well, but I don't want to, attempt to try to explain it. So I thought maybe you could explain it a little bit better, what we're actually talking about. We're talking about, people not being able to breathe, right, basically, right? It's what they were making everybody worry about with a 99.7% recovery rate before. What if it isn't that high? So what are we really talking about here? What are we looking at that's coming at the same time as cold weather and financial problems ahead for most people?
Well, I would encourage everybody to look up something called the white lung, #white lung. Anybody out there on the net that can go find commentary, videos, pictures, x-rays. A lot of it's x-rays coming out of China right now, where they'll show a progression of like day 1 to day 7 and how this looks like cotton candy grows in the lungs, to the point where then your heart's overstrained. You can't really breathe to get the oxygen, so your heart's going to work way faster to try to extract and get that blood to move around more to try to exchange the carbon dioxide out of your breath back in for oxygen when you're breathing a breath in. So your heart's going to work so much more, because if you can't breathe, then your lungs are full of what looks like a fibrosis type of cotton candy growth that is unbelievable, the way it grows, and it doubles every day inside the lungs. It's something almost space alien like that you would expect to see straight out of a sci-fi movie. And that's the best way I can try to describe it, the progression of it, the way it's a dot, and then it's 2, and then it's larger, and then it's 4x, and then it's 8x, and then it's 16x, and it's doubling every day. And then suddenly you can actually see it cover an eighth of the entire lung capacity, a quarter of the entire lung capacity, then half. And then you're like, oh, this is, what am I looking at here? That's only 9 or 10 days. Like, what is this thing? And how does it be? They don't know much about it. It's a completely new thing. Unknown exactly right now what it is, but they're just giving it a name so people at least can associate the effect or event. Again, it's a variant. It's not even a variant. It's a completely new something that has evolved. That if you've had any problem in the past with sort of lung capacity, breathing, some sort of sickness, it's not 99.999 recovery rate. It's something in the 50-50 at that point. Like, this thing is so all-encompassing and strong, and when you see the progression of it, it's just really difficult to even put what I'm talking about into words, is how fast it grows in the human body, like how fast it moves into the host and then completely turns the lungs into 2 sacks of cotton candy. I mean, we're looking here at something that, how many alien movies have you seen where like a parasite gets into a human and then it starts to grow and it gets a little bigger, and then they notice it, and then they grow through like the scary thing of pops out the stomach or something. Like that kind of fastness, but in your lungs. And I'm sitting here going, whoa. Paul Cottrell had explained to me today, a lot of countries are going to be in different conundrums here. All right, in the States, if you have that, they see it. If you're able to get the liquid pumped out of the lungs, that seems to be the building block of it, and it also is like a doughy flour is sort of what it's been described as. We have the ability to pump the lungs fast if we need to get that fluid out of your lungs. Well, a lot of countries and a lot of places don't. But again, it comes down to the staff. How many staff quit, got fired because they wouldn't follow protocol at the hospitals, just are exhausted, they're done, or they themselves succumbed to the first round of this. Like, it's lean on the manpower anywhere on the planet now, with so many people that have just decided to move on after this whole event over the last 2 years. Whether it was move on to a different dimensional realm after giving up the physical body, or just mentally moving on and not wanting to partake in that system anymore, or just, want to rest. That took us what's really on staff at the moment in any place? At the airlines, they're the least of the things. I looked at that airline debacle and I was like, what is going on here? And imagine if people that were sick were stuck in those lounges and all that stuff for many hours with not very good ventilation because they had power outages too. And imagine if that was the mixing pot first in that enclosed environment. And then whoosh, they got to go out to different parts of the world, different parts of our country, continents, whatever. Whatever it is, it can be described as something similar to the last one, but it's completely different. But there's a lot of similarities to it, but it's very different. I think it's very different. I mean, the herd to get us over into the central bank digital currencies, I was on Zoltan Polzar's letter today, War and Commodity Encumbrance, talking about the BRIC expansion and the M-CBDC bridge project. It's a currency swap, just like they do with the overnight derivatives market, the overnight swap market. Overnight interlending banking rate. That SOFR has come live now. And it's on the currency swap, but it's on a CBDC settlement. And I swear to you, they're using XRP for settlement on that liquidity. But the G7 of the East, as it's been claimed here, BRIC expansion, and they're talking about Bretton Woods 3, where they've now classified gold as a tier 1 asset that can be instantly exchanged off for guaranteed liquidity for something else. Petro-UN is what they're talking about. This Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange, fully utilized for RMB settlements for oil and gas trade. And they're going to be using the same currency swap on the same central bank digital currency bridge project. R3 Corda and XRP running this one. I am going to give a best guess at that. But how does this come in without complete collapse? I was always thinking it'd be collapse because, like, with the an economy thing, cities would get overrun. They'd have to bring the military in the cities, da-da-da-da. I got it all wrong. I completely got it wrong. This white lung thing is going to do everything for them. I really, really intuitively feel that. What we envisioned of this full violent act to come in to get you to change, it's not. This thing is going to be let to run loose. This white lung is going to be like the abominable snowman running through tropics and polar areas at the same time. And because of how many people it takes to even, like I say, attend to family members during this time is going to completely shut everything down on the society. You thought COVID was bad with shutdowns. You've never seen it when nobody is working during the same shutdown. That's where it takes us in 2023 in a very rapid fashion too. We're not talking about 6 months. We're talking like a month from now, 2 at most. We'll be right back. David DuByne, Ransom Godwin.
And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of mini Ice Age conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne, right here with Ransom Godwin tonight. Just before we stepped on the break, talking about the white lung, the new thing that's going to stress society as so many people are going to be involved taking care of what this, there's no definition really of it yet, except something of a plague shall be the best way to describe it, of the lungs. Before we went on the break, think about that. We were talking about central bank digital currencies, and I had it wrong. Where I was thinking each of these individual events might be done by force to get you to give up your dollars and move into a central bank digital currency with your whatever app on the phone is with facial recognition and digital rationing cards so you could access the foods because, well, we're just not going to grow as much because of the Hunga Tonga eruption and the water vapor blocking the atmosphere, delaying planting in the southern hemisphere. And with the disruptions we're seeing in the war, the deindustrialization of Europe with the fertilizer production down to zero, which was 40% of the world's fertilizer not coming, just on that one aspect alone. And then, you know, how much agriculture would it reduce? If you take out 40% of the world's population or the fertilizer minus last year's reductions, and you come out to, wow, that's not going to be able to grow very much food this year. Not zero by any means, but to the point where people would be heavily looking to see if it would happen again next year, because that would cause like a global panic, because the way it looks each year is going to be less on the food production. Well, that was expected in the grand solar minimum following the past 6 of these every 400 years going back. You just get a reduction of food. So for me, I was thinking, all right, governments know about this grand solar minimum. They know the magnetic fields on the sun. That's stepping down the double layering of magnetic field. And then also in 2024, the 4 gas giants creating a second toroidal field in our solar system as the Earth would pass through those 2 toroid looping fields, the sun and the second field of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, interplaying and us cruising through the block wall or the zero magnetic field overlay on those 2 toroid fields. Everything you're seeing going on, I thought was going to be forced down to get you to move to the new system. But now I'm coming with the conclusion that if this white lung were to run like it did in the bubonic plague or something similar, that society would just move to that as gravity moves downhill, objects roll downhill, because it would be something better than nothing, because so much is going to be tied up into this thing and taking care of it. The resources won't be able to run the rest of our planet. Like the supply chain is civilization, period. Now, if there's not enough people to work in that, then the society is going to have to decline at the rate of the supply chain and the disruptions therein feeding into whatever arm of it is. So Revolution Radio, thanks for letting us have the talk tonight. We're streaming out on Vigilante TV. Shout out. Over on to our YouTube channels, of course. What else do we have? Let me see here. Ransom, if you will allow me. I'm trying to figure out, you know, what is the best streaming platform for most people to engage with is the question. And I'm looking at it thinking, should they go to the Mountain High TV, or should we go to, or Mountain High Time, excuse me, or the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast, Ransom Godwin's Facebook page, Mini Ice Age Facebook page. See, we're trying to share the messaging of it's time to get ready now. And I'm so glad we did, and we have had the time to get ready, because I was looking at these last few years thinking, you know, if you haven't gotten to the point by now that after this full first since 2020 and the whole COVID thing happened, like up to now, and that it didn't kind of dawn on you that maybe things could get more broken after that point and you didn't get ready, you know, we're at that point where you're really, I don't know. I don't think much is going to continue to function as even its diminished functional point. So Ransom, thanks for joining me again. And yeah, we are on Rumble tonight. And again, Vigilante TV. Thanks again.
Yeah, we got a good 120 something there in the Rumble and 100 something there on MIAC. And I got my crew in there on the Mountain High Time watching. So any of those platforms are good. So whatever's your choice. I was thinking maybe if you're in one of those, you could surf over to the other chats and meet some new like-minded people. Cross-platform social media there. Meet some new people in both chats there. Because I see lots of people that I recognize over in the MIAC chat. Some of those are some of my subs, but either way, it's good that we have it on all these platforms because you know how easy it is. In the past, I've been shut off for just regular stuff we talk about. So there's no telling what we'll say that will cause the censors to turn us off. But what I do seem to realize is, when you're on these platforms, you could talk about whatever you want as long as it doesn't benefit, educate, or actually give someone some real information about what's going on. I mean, you've been looking the same way I have on these platforms for the past several, I'm going to say 5 years, but it got really bad after 2019, 2020, where they just will shut you off for whatever. And some of it was mainstream agreed upon news, and they still turn you off for talking about it. So that's a real scary thing. And I think that's a good indicator of where society as a whole is going when more and more censorship takes place. And I see America going the way that China is right now and the way that they censor there. It seems like they are not going to give up until they have destroyed anybody that is offering free speech in the Western world. But I kind of wanted to move over to this, we were talking about the white lung and what that might mean. But I wanted to put this to you because I think we kind of touched on it before, but I got this theory that, these people that run, when I always say they, I mean the elite, whoever it is, from Bill Gates, you name them, the people that are in the know, the people that are in the decision making, if they actually are, and they're not just a lower rung of it. But there's this MIT technology review, and it's talking about a startup that says they have already begun releasing particles into the atmosphere in an effort to tweak the climate, make sunsets. It's already attempting to earn revenue for geoengineering, a move likely to provoke widespread criticism. And I'm going to go ahead and criticize it right now, but not in the way you think. I'm going to criticize it right now because it's an old idea. It's an old idea that I think they've been doing already for the past 10 years. Now, hear me out. By the time that you usually learn about something as a regular citizen, even if you think you're informed, odds are it's already been happening for a long time, from technology to any situation on Earth. So I'm going to go ahead and theorize or postulate that this is one of those things. Now, I know there's been a lot of arguments over the years on whether or not chemtrails or contrails is what you see up in the sky. But let's forget about that. Let's talk about programs that have been going on since at least right here. This article is more than 10 years old on The Guardian. Bill Gates backs climate scientists lobbying for large-scale geoengineering. And when you get into the details of this, they're all talking about the same thing. They're talking about spraying nanoparticles into the upper atmosphere along with sulfur and other things to reflect sunlight and maybe even other kinds of energy back into the universe. Now, if they're as educated, or, I'm assuming more educated on the topics that we talk about, like, the grand solar minimum and cycles of the magnetic field collapsing, speciation, extinction, et cetera, I would imagine that these people have been talking about that for the last 30 or 40 years, in their own circles, and that they know because they're in the groups that get a little bit of the real knowledge, what's going on. So if you were to, lie to the public, let's say, about something for a long time because you knew a certain outcome was going to happen, and then all of a sudden you pop up with some program right about the same time where you take credit for the way it's going. So like we talked about before, if they all knew that it was about to start getting colder right about now, and that every year we were going to have to, have more and more crop losses from early freezes, from less sunlight making it to the earth, et cetera, maybe you might, put out a bunch of particles in the atmosphere that blocks the sunlight even more, for one reason, to make it harder for people to grow food, especially if you just so happen to be in the business of making genetically engineered plants that can survive different variables in the environment, i.e. GMOs and Bill Gates. So I'm going to go ahead and put a name on it. But if you look at this, so this company is acting like they just now started doing it. They didn't get nobody's permission. They're already doing it. However, I knew that the story was an old story and that it sounded so familiar that I feel like a Mandela is almost happening. So I went on a little research crusade to find the same program earlier because I had remembered Bill Gates doing the same thing in New Mexico. So here it is. A Bill Gates venture aims to spray dust into the atmosphere to block the sun. What could go wrong? Blah, 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 blah. And it talks about their little program of spraying out calcium carbonate, sulfur, and other things into the air. But guess what? He already had this program, the beginnings of this program going on in New Mexico. First sun dimming experiment will test a way to cool the earth. Researchers plan to spray sunlight reflective particles into the stratosphere, an approach that could ultimately be used to quickly lower the planet's temperature. Well, let's go back to that argument of contrails and chemtrails and geoengineering. The people that really believe it believe that, you know, they've been controlling the weather for some time through these programs of spraying heavy metals and other things up into the stratosphere, etc. Some more critical thinking type people, and you know, not the mainstream either, have always had the idea that that's silly, that man, no matter how hard it tries, doesn't have enough power to change the weather on the planet when combating the sun as the source of the weather. And I tend to agree with them to a point. I think that what has happened here is not only did they know that the cycle was coming, but they wanted to be the problem reaction solution. The problem was fake. They gave you the problem. They made everybody worry about it for 20 years. But now they have the solution. They have all these programs going on where they're just going to spray a bunch of stuff in the air. When we already have more particles in the air than normal, you keep bringing up Tunga, and we're expected to have some more bigger eruptions. At the same time, our magnetic field is collapsing, which could mean any number of things, from us getting wiped out from a CME, or just cosmic particles coming in that change the way that we normally live on the planet Earth. And I think that's safe to say that there's enough evidence to say that that does happen. Look at the Neanderthals 42,000 years ago. They just disappeared for whatever reason. One of the main theories is something happened with the magnetic field that they just couldn't tolerate, or it wasn't, they just couldn't adapt fast enough. But here we are at this time where they know that changes are taking place. So wouldn't it be smart for them to say that they have these programs where they're spraying and they're cooling the earth for you. They're saving the planet for you because, it's getting colder. They did that. It's kind of like, you remember Obama's speech where he tried to tell everybody that if they had a business or if they worked hard and they saved their money and they bought a house, they didn't buy that. They didn't build that. He's real famous for saying that somebody else did that for you, even though they didn't. Not really. This is kind of what Bill Gates and these other companies that are all of a sudden you're going to start seeing a number of them popping up. And it's not just them. Think about it. I brought this up last week. The first baby factory is announced to open up. So the world of the sci-fi version that they gave us, they are now giving us in reality. And it's kind of hard to argue that at this point. Now, 10 years ago, I would say, yeah, that sounds crazy, and maybe that's way far off in the future. But from the last 2 years, I've seen everything predicted, everything I was worried about, all come to fruition. And the other day when I was watching TV, to show you how dystopic it really is, my computer was broke, so I had to send it to a repair shop to get it fixed because I didn't know exactly, what was wrong with it or whatever. So I sent it over there. Well, I started watching TV, right? Because I didn't have nothing else to do at the time. So I turn it on, and a commercial comes on from the Department of Homeland Security talking about how to pack a go bag. And guess what they want to put in your go bag? So I'm thinking, I pack a go bag, I'm putting self-protection, I'm putting some dry food for the road, some protein powder, some veggie powder, a way to clean water, some tools, etc. Stuff that I can actually use that's not heavy and I can carry it. Their version of a go bag is extra mask, hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes, and the directions to your local quarantine camp. I poop you not. I don't want to say a bad word, but I kid you not. They are saying you should know where your local camp is. And I can't help but remember the conspiracy theories floating around between 2000 and 2010 about the FEMA site practices, the empty Walmarts, The prisons that were verified to have no one in it, like there's one in Alaska that holds like 400,000 people or has the potential to, but no one's there, evidently, allegedly. And not only that, that they were hiring people from other countries to be the guards and facilitators of the security there. Now, I can only think of one reason that you would do that, and that's so that the people wouldn't feel as connected with the people that are staying in the camps. But I don't think that they really need to do that, judging by what's going on in China, because think of the massive military mechanism or governmental mechanism that it took to lock cities down, to build quarantine camps, to make people go there. And then, like I said, not to beat a dead horse, but what happened after the military rolled out a few weeks ago? I don't really know, because I mean, it seems like that story just ended. What happened to the white paper revolution? Is it still happening? I mean, I feel like, I'm just cut off from any real information. And when I go through the internet and I look at these news stories or I watch videos of news stories, I feel like I'm getting less than 1% of any truth coming from them. So to base your reality on what they say is, I think, a fundamental flaw for anyone. You need to start reading between the lines. Maybe these things might not happen, but like you said, when you're talking about looking at people with degrees, looking at evidence, thinking that, there may be an outbreak of this that's far more devastating than the last one, you might want to listen to them. Not that it's going to happen, but you've seen that it has the potential to happen. So just like the blizzard and the storm front last week that we were talking about when it was rolling in, mark my words, things are going to get expensive, and we're going to continue to see rolling blackouts, not just here, but in Europe. They're already talking about in Austria, telling the people, you better get used to being in the dark. You better get used to being cold. And then, you have all of these neighboring countries not too far away where they're telling them that you can't farm. You cannot grow food. You can't do this. You can't do that. And then at the same time, let's get into like the real science of it. What do you think? Is there any real potential for them to dim the light on the earth, for one? Are you in the camp with they can do it? Or are you in the camp with, their technology isn't big enough to actually outcompete the sun for what happens on the earth? Or is it more likely what I'm saying? It's just a fraud. It's just one of these companies like, the solar wind companies that got all the millions of dollars, or the solar farms that got all the millions of dollars under Obama. But guess what? They didn't ever make them. They just took the money. It seems something like that. Well, we have this program so far up in the sky that you can't prove or disprove it's there. But you know what? We're keeping it cool for you so that the planet don't burn up. But you got to do your part by not using petroleum, not using energy. You can't eat beef. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't farm because that hurts the earth, if that makes any sense. Because we all know that they keep telling us things that are backwards. I mean, obviously, farming doesn't hurt the earth. It never has for the probably million years that people have been doing it on the earth. Maybe commercial farming, and that's only because of their deforestation, side effects that some of them do, which is slash and burn, that kind of stuff. We found better ways to farm. You can farm in between the trees. You don't have to cut all the trees. And then the pollution of these cancerous toxins that keep getting approved. And no one wants to talk about the real problems of stuff. So just keeping all that on mind, who cares what the people on the news are saying? Yes, they're going to scare you. But the problem is that they're scaring you with real things they're doing. So at the same time, it's a false narrative. That this is what I think a lot of people don't understand. Yes, a virus can be real. And yes, they can give you false propaganda at the same time. Yes, it can be deadly for some people and not for other people. So like some people will be thinking, well, like me, I had COVID. I had no problem. We were sick for a couple of days. It sucked. We got over it. We ate vitamins. And then get back to this white lung thing, because I was a little bit, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit scared to catch the regular COVID because I saw a lot of people with their breathing problems. And I'm a smoker since like 20. I've been smoking Black and Mild cigars and some other plants. I enjoy smoking other plants. But I was thinking, my lungs must be fried. But when I got it, I didn't have any respiratory problems. I just had some body aches or whatever. But that is terrifying to think that something could go around. And I did watch one woman in China. I don't know if that's what she had. I'm not saying that I could verify that, obviously. But it seemed to be that she was having a breathing problem out on the sidewalk, and no one cared, really. I mean, a few people stopped and called for a doctor, but the hospital that she was near didn't even come. Nobody, they didn't even see anybody. She died on the sidewalk. And I'm watching videos of, these things that happen in other countries where they have lost what I'm going to say they are a little bit ahead of us, not far, but where all humanity, as far as a community or a civilization, is gone. When someone can jump off a roof and no one even turns their head or cares, when little kids are getting run over in the street, when people are freezing outside and no one cares. In Buffalo, when they were cleaning the streets, they found all kinds of people that were frozen outside. Now, I think it's like 2 or 3 for sure. And I saw an article where they think that they may be finding, more and more bodies. And these are of either people that thought they could handle it, they weren't prepared, they were homeless, they were sick, whatever the case is. But the truth comes down to no one can help you but you, period. So if you don't prepare for stuff, even if it doesn't happen, if it ever does happen, you're just up the creek without a paddle. I mean, I don't even know how people are still arguing or calling people names or thinking people are weird for prepping, for being prepared. That's what America used to be all about, is being prepared. It was a necessity. When our founders moved here, they realized the winters were brutal. The springs were muddy, and they had to deal with all these new circumstances. So how did they do that? They stocked up all year from the beginning of spring to the end of summer. That's the way we've always done it. And that's the problem with civilization now, is we don't do that. We're totally dependent on an AI-driven supply chain network that's, what do they call it? I forget the name of it. It's just-in-time shipping. And all of the companies across the world have gone to that model. It was started in Japan and just moved everywhere. So that is great when things are running well. But guess what? It's not great for when things are not running, because that means there ain't nothing showing up just in time, because they had no stockpile. They had no reserves. It didn't get shipped until it was needed. And that was a long-winded thing. But what do you think about this? These programs that are now openly admitted, from the CIA director, what's his name, Brennan, to all down to these companies that are claiming they're already doing it, spraying stuff in the air to make it colder, basically, when we're already going in that direction. What is the purpose of that? Or is it just another one of a long line of, schemes or psyops?
I was a little bit distracted there. I was talking while scanning out the window with night vision goggles looking for Sasquatch. But if I was following the conversation there, your words about geoengineering startup, Make Sunsets is the actual name of this company. How quirky on the words, ha ha ha. Because generally, if there's more volcanic ash in the air, it creates more vivid sunsets. So they're saying, we're going to inject SO2 like after a volcanic eruption and create a more bright red sunset or orange sunset or purple sunset. Depends on the density of it. I think, that it is to show the populace, at least plant the seed, cooling. So when it does cool, this article has been pushed so much that if it does start to cool, at least an enormous amount of the chatter can push back to this Make Sunsets. And then, at least for a while, it can be blamed on the private geoengineering firms. But by that point, we'll be into the food shortages, and that'll be long gone. I mean, it would be much like, where did the trillions of dollars of U.S. dollars go from the Pentagon early September before the towers went down? That whole incident, too, that entire inquiry of where trillions of dollars could not be accounted for back in 2001 just suddenly disappeared. Well, this would be the exact same thing, where by the time they moved over into say, look, it's the private geoengineering companies, look, they cooled the planet, then we're going to get this double mixed messaging. A private company's doing it bad, but look, it did cool the planet good, so there was now only governments can be in control of it, because you saw how bad it got with the runaway private companies. So this Hunga Tonga eruption that pushed all the water vapor into the atmosphere, it is absolutely, unequivocally, without a doubt, going to set in motion a year without a summer. It's already begun in the southern hemisphere, very measurable. I've been doing a report on this, news report, The cooling is very pronounced. It's easy to spot on all the continents in the southern hemisphere. Now that has transited over the equator to the North Pole now. So if you look at what happened with the volcanic eruption of 1815, Tambora, and the way the subsequent cooling in Europe of 3 degrees Celsius, 3, that's 7.5 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit or more down, because that's the average. So take into consideration all these things, and the volcanic eruption would definitely set in some massive cooling noticeable to everybody on the planet. Like there's nobody that's not going to see and notice that it's chillier, it's more cloudy, and it's rainier. Unless you're in a different kind of microclimate where it just turns dry because of a pinched jet stream further up in a pressure pattern, unless you get that kind of play out, just on the general, it's going to be noticeable that weather patterns are different. It's cooler, wetter, it's just different. It's a noticeable difference that something is just, it feels like dew is coming out of the atmosphere, kind of, is the best way I can describe it, on everything at different levels and altitude, and the dewiness of that moisture coming out of the atmosphere on all surfaces and layers around the planet. That's kind of what's occurring, and it's going to be noticeable. But who takes credit for that? Do they give credit to a volcano? Well, we don't need to pay the carbon tax now because the volcano, it's going to cool the earth by 3 degrees, 2 degrees Celsius. We got another 5 or 10 years before we're done with this cycle. We don't need to worry with carbon tax cooling. Like, how do you sell a world a carbon tax on a cooling planet? Unless you're right on top of this natural cycle and then you put these in play, but big time, like make sunsets is the first, and the next week there'll be another one, and the next week there'll be 6 more. And so, and it's across the mainstream news every single day about all these little geoengineering companies. And then they're going to put 2 and 2 together for you as a story of like, then there's 50. Oh, there's way too many of them that's unregulated. Oh, look, these guys push this much stuff, a gloat in the atmosphere. And then it'll be under control. But then if it cools, then the cooling can be, shown and blamed again on this, all these geoengineering companies. But look, it worked. Now, because it worked, we're going to stabilize the temperatures about 2 degrees cooler, everybody, okay? And then we're going to go back to baseline 0. Because what they keep talking about in the climate debate is there was a 0 mark somewhere where temperature was apparently 0 at the equilibrium of averages over the last, 100,000 years or 50,000 or 10,000 or 500 or whatever they choose this week as the baseline of average temperature. If we were to bring that down 2 degrees, that would be another 2 below baseline. So they could say we brought the temperatures down by using this program back down to the point where we don't even have to do any of this carbon credit stuff anymore, because now we can control the atmosphere doing this geoengineering program. But all along, the Hunga Tonga eruption was responsible for the cooling. They're riding on top of the natural cycle, taking credit for it. And then again, once it gets taken credit for and it's approved, it's working, quote unquote, the general person won't know anything about this unless what they're told. Then they just claim it and say, all right, we're going to run it as a government program. Now, you still need to pay the carbon taxes because we need to keep this program ongoing. Now, the taxes aren't going to be as high as they were. We were going to do a 50% tax, but all you have to do is do a 15% tax on this one. It was going to be 50, but we're going to let you go with 15. And people are like, oh, so good. Thank you for letting us go for 15. Because I saw this, I'm going to relate this to the story I saw about a lot of states going to drop the state income tax. And I was thinking, okay, it's going to go to 0, like Tennessee's got no state income tax. So I thought the way I'd already known it, that it was going to go to 0 by the headline. Nope. The headline was a state, I forget, there were 10 of them. None of them were really going to 0. It was all about going from 4.99 down to 4.5 or something. Like they're dropping the state income tax. People are like, yeah, they dropped it 0.5%. Yeah, they dropped it 20% or whatever. But still, it's a tax on the state that you shouldn't have. But the way they framed it, instead of having a 5% tax, they'd knock it down to 2 or 3. But then people are like, yeah, that's such a huge win. It's only a 2%. Oh, wait, it should be 0. And they're still happy that it's a 2%. Same thing. Instead of being 50% for the carbon tax you would have had to pay to drive your crappy electric vehicle around and get your carbon credits so you could buy your printed food once a week, it's not going to be 50% now. It's only going to be 10%, but we need to control the program. They're going to sell it something like this. I don't know if I'm too far off the mark, Ransom. I'm hoping I'm getting close enough a little bit for these cooling credits. I think they're $10 each that they're selling. Like if you let us spray in the sky, we're going to get, they're going to sell $10 of carbon credit by spraying this much particulate in the atmosphere to block the sunlight. That's insane that anybody's allowed this to go forward.
I think it's funny the names they come up with this, like you pointed out, that referencing the sunset, right? And I'm looking at this Bill Gates company, and it's called Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment, or SCOPE. So what do they mean by that?
SCOPE.
Yeah, what they mean by that is that they never do these kind of things on accident. So it makes me wonder. You know how a lot of people talk about blue beam and all these other things, and what it would take to have a hologram in the sky of a certain kind. And then it also makes me think of, we're having this magnetic field change that's going on. It's shrinking, it's moving, the magnetic poles are moving. What kind of a borealis or the plasma petroglyph type things would we see if they're also, dropping in particles of stuff that would change the color of things when the light comes in? It seems like to me that, with these names like Scope, that they would be is that just a joke to us? Should we look in a little bit closer at their program? Or are they trying to say that, this is part of another program? When you just look at Bill Gates by himself, I'm sure that if you went and you looked up George Soros and where all his money goes, or any one of these players like Klaus Schwab, all of them, you'll find out that they invest in all of these companies about a decade ahead of time. So just judging on this old Forbes article that's about 10 years old, where they were already talking about it, and now in real life, you have a company that's already doing it, basically. But yeah, ScopeX. It's like a joke. It's like that thing. What is it? We have MAD, mutually assured destruction, right? And now all the people are dying mysteriously. Suddenly, it's sad. It's sad because it's the sudden adult death syndrome, right? That's sad. And then they tease us with the nuclear war, and they're all going to go jump in bunkers called dumbs, right? So it's like a joke always when they do these things, and they have this. But I could guarantee that if you go look back at all of these guys that you see at the World Economic Forum and go back about 10 years and look at their investments, you could tell just about like a future, like a fortune teller, what's about to happen. So just like Bill Gates said 10 years ago, they're going to start spraying stuff. Now we're doing it. 10 years ago, they were talking about, gene editing. You can go back all the way to Dolly. Everybody should have woke up with Dolly, the sheep that was cloned, and realized that they were well beyond the ability in genetic sciences than they were claiming to be. And now we're here where they're literally talking about a designer future. And I know I harp on this, but whenever they brag to me that I'm hackable, or at least a human being is hackable, and that they're no longer going to stop at the skin, that they need to get in the skin and find out what's going on in your body so that they could reprogram it. And I'm scamming through all the tech companies, looking at their micro robotics, their nanotech, etc. They're telling me all the different ways that they can use these. They can, choose which sperm goes. They can destroy cancer cells. In theory, I've watched several demonstrations of technology that should be able to go in your veins and clear out any, blood clots of any size and just dissolve them into nothing. All of these technologies are about to come out. Like, for example, the FDA has just approved a new blood thinning drug that just, it just so happens to be needed right now for whatever reason. And then you have all of these things that just come out just at the right time. Problem, reaction, solution. It's so in your face, it's hard to ignore it. But what does that mean for me? I don't know. If there's a real, let's call it a plague or a pandemic, it's kind of overused, but if a real disease, whether manufactured or natural, goes around the globe. We know this has happened before in the past. We have genetic markers on our DNA that tell us that, we've gone through these things, and you can go back to the Black Death and all of that stuff. If it really goes around, what are you going to do to stop it? Other than turning into like a zombie movie, which, we brought that up before. That's happening right now. You have the masses hungry. They want to eat out your substance. And then you got the little groups of takers and the groups of producers. And then you have this invisible government hand and everything that just retreated back into continuity of government. So we have that scenario now. And when they're telling us, they're going to spray stuff in the air, we're going to start growing babies in factories. We have new plants that'll grow in different zones, and we can move it because they're climate sensitive or climate designed plants. Everybody's still acting like we're 50 years ago. Like, we still have time to debate these new ideas. We don't. And so we'll see within this year if what's going on in China will be a repeat of 2020 and 2019. But when you really look into that, you see all of these patents, you see drugs getting approved, one company suing the other company for intellectual property that supposedly didn't exist, but yet it existed in their lawsuit back in 2016. If you guys want to look into the manufacturers, I don't want to say too many keywords. You could see that this is totally from the top down designed. And when they're laughing in our face saying that they're resetting us, I think we should take them seriously. I really think, a lot of people say, you're just fear mongering, and stop fear mongering. It'll be fine. You can't confront a problem if you don't acknowledge it exists. And that's like one of the main takeaways from today's era is if you can't face the problems that are like right in your face, that are proven beyond a reasonable doubt for any critical thinking person that is happening, like food reduction, crumbling governments, crumbling infrastructure, mass migration. And another thing, I wanted to bring this up because I said that mass migration. When I was in the Yucatan, we took a bus from Cancun, or not Cancun, but a little bit south of Cancun and one of the smaller villages. We took a bus. We went to Chichen Itza. And while we were doing that, we got to see I did, if you were paying attention, they are cutting up the jungle into suburban neighborhoods. I looked at the way that the roads are planned. It's neighborhoods. It's obvious. I've seen it before. When they start construction, they map out the roads first, right? And then they start installing the utilities so that everybody can be on the utilities and be on the payment system. So you have all of these people living in the Yucatan that really aren't on the grid. They're really not in the grid in the way that me and you are. Yeah, they probably have a cell phone and blah, 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 but they are cutting up the jungle into what looks like to me suburban areas. So what I see happening is people are moving out, all of the people that don't have jobs and stuff. And then when they leave back home, corporations are buying up big swaths. You have socialist governments talking about building giant rails for the local people. That doesn't seem to help them out any. I mean, like, they've never traveled into the big cities before, so why do they all of a sudden need to? I don't know. But it looks like they are developing the equator for the next 100 years. And I think that's all going to start at 2030 is the mark that I give it, because I keep looking at these programs that they say they have to be done by 2030. And I just saw a bizarre message from some supposed CIA guy on Twitter that was talking about that he knows for a fact, or that the people that told him know for a fact, that there's an event coming so big that the Earth will not be recognizable. And we've heard this many times, the asteroids coming, blah, 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 whatever. But this guy doesn't put an event to it. He only gives the date of 2027. And when you read all of the elites material, the publications that they put out, they have dates on there, 2030, 2050. But one of the main ones is 2030, and that goes in from the project for a new American century all the way to the Bilderberg plans of when they want to do stuff that they push on the UN. And then you have the literally named Agenda 2030 that was Agenda 21. Now go back and read Agenda 21 and tell me if everything in that thing hasn't happened already.
No, that would give me nightmares, actually. So I'm not going to. But I will say that that's a good point. I never thought of that, developing the equator for the next 100 years. So the way presently thinking is all the food production that's 45 degrees north latitude and above, which is most of Canada. And then go across the northern hemisphere, and then you come up 45 degrees north and above. Oh, that's parts of Russia. 45 degrees north and above. Oh, that's parts of Kazakhstan, parts of China. Then you go, well, that's a huge amount of the world's grain basket getting cut down there. A good 20% to start. But if you had everything located on the equator, that space, which would have been people, see, again, I thought it would be by force to do this, like get all those people off their land so they could turn everything into ag land. They would leave just on their own volition because of these types of events that are coming in, this white lung event. Like I was kind of trying to understand in Finland, during the modern minimum, say 1640 was the height of it, 90% between, it was around 1640, 1650. 90% of the population had left Finland. 90. And it was something like this for 70 years before families started to return. But you got to realize that would have been your grandkid going back to get the grandfather's farm or house or whatever it was. So the possibility for things to get completely disrupted for some time, you would have to move the grow zone. I've been talking about the Sahel in North Africa becoming the new world's breadbasket. It would take the same things. You would need a central bank digital currency with a stable coin where 1 equals 1 anywhere on the planet that's digital and available to convert into the local currency. That could be another digital one, or it could be what we know as paper and coins, or it could be used to pay off a credit card. That could be used as a stable coin in another country. So whoever would come to work on the project would be paid in these stable coins. And if something were to happen to the terrestrial grid, they could broadcast up through Quantum. That's another satellite-owned system owned by the Chinese. Go up to Starlink. That's another from Musk. How about the traditional satellite systems? Whatever's up there now, private companies, that you would have access to that satellite system to broadcast the transition or transactions back down. Doesn't matter how remote you were out in the middle of Chad, in the middle of the desert, your boss could pay you, or somebody, your firm, company, whatever, could pay you digitally, and you would still be able to use that upload, downsell, order, whatever, from the middle of the desert because it's all digital, except that everywhere on the planet is one single currency. Like, what would that be? DAO, DAI, which is from the Maker Institute. Would it be Tether? No. USDC? Maybe. How about Pax Gold? That's a stable coin backed by gold. How about Load? That's one backed by silver. The new grow zones would have to be set up, financed. And again, the financing, if the full system collapses, they're going to have to bring on they're going to try it again with the whole financing, credit thing, loan thing. But if the system were to go down to something like 90%, people have moved around the planet trying to get ready. This whole white lung thing takes out half the population. By the time they start it back up again, all the investments and everything would be destructed anyway. There'd be no value left for anything. The only thing valuable would be either the house you're standing on, the piece of paper that claims your land, or gold and silver in your hand, or whatever, like food and seeds and stuff. Nothing else would have value. Oh, then they would start a new system and go, we're setting up this new grow zone out here. It needs all this water piping. It needs all this irrigation. It needs all these motors, all this road construction, all this processing equipment, all this seed, fertilizer, machinery, et cetera. And we're going to set up the African Sahel to be the equivalent of the United States and Canada and Mexico combined into a single grow zone. That gets 2 times rotation on the crop. Not 1, 2, because it's in the very bright, very UV-rich northern African Sahel area. Pumping water from the Nubian sandstone aquifer underground, in addition to the changes in the West African monsoon, bringing more natural rainfall over that same area. You're setting up an entirely new grow zone for a new planet that has set a new system. Think about coming out of the ice age. Reverse it for a second. You got to think about the Earth locked in ice for 80,000 years. out of the 100,000, because on the periphery going into the ice age and coming out of the ice age, depending on how quickly you think that happens. So we'll give it an 80,000 year window there of locked in ice. All the climate patterns would have stabilized for that entire period of time. Like what we're seeing now is just a little scrimpy 10,000 years to try to get it together and figure out the climate system. And now we're going to go back into something very different magnetic fields. Just it's a change for sure. Now, is it a full-blown ice age onsetting again? I can't say that. Can I say we're going into at least a 400 or a 2,000 year magnetic change on the planet where the jet streams and cloud cells are moving to different positions and that'll disrupt agriculture and it'll get cooler? Yeah, I can say that.
Well, I got a question for you, David.
Go.
I was in the Yucatan. It was about 85 degrees, and we were walking around, and I mean, it felt like I was in a microwave oven. And I'm a desert guy. I'm used to like 100, 115, no big deal. As long as I got a bottle of water, lukewarm water, I'm fine. But when I was there, I just felt the whole different, feeling of the environment, the humidity, every little square centimeter of the jungle is occupied by some kind of plant animal or, some fungus or something. And I was just thinking, that's a jungle environment. It's also a rainforest area there. And they're usually, from what I heard, about 85 to 115 degrees, which is very hot. And I would think that certain plants that we eat, that we grow for food, couldn't tolerate maybe those extreme temperatures. But if you saw what happened during this little polar blast or Arctic blast or whatever you want to call it, it pushed all the way down into the Yucatan where they were down to like 60, 55 degrees, which is, temperatures that normally are way north, right? So
New Zealand, it turned that area of the Yucatan into New Zealand for a moment.
So what I was thinking is if they already knew that, this may become a normal phenomenon for the cold air to push that far down into there, which would change what I was asking basically is, wouldn't that necessarily change the grow zone to grow new kinds of foods, maybe some of the kind of foods that we grow in the northern hemisphere further north? But just think about a different temperature range from 55 to 90, which is something that is, from what I understand, great, perfect growing window right there. But not only will it be that, it'll be that almost year round, because in that area, the temperatures, they vary, but within the same 20 degrees or 30 degrees, they don't really go up and down that far at that place. But if we have weather fronts that are the new norm, that are pushing down that far, giving them more of a winter or a cooling down effect, wouldn't that just open that whole area up for growing different kind of food productions, more along the lines of the stuff we eat? Because when I was down there, basically the only thing that I saw that they were growing in any amount was agave cactus. We saw several fields of agave. They're making tequila, and I know that there's avocado fields and stuff near there. But that's only kind of two types of things going on there. But they could open that up for corn, rice, wheat with these new temperatures. What do you think about that? I mean, is that part of the idea that I think that maybe that they're planning for? Because you mentioned North Africa, and we know probably about 5,000 years ago, North Africa was a totally different place. And different times in the past, in human history, it's been like a rainforest there, tropical rainforest, different things. They have different theories on why it dried out and turned into the Sahara Desert. But you would think that whatever process happened obviously can go in the reverse direction, which would make that whole area around the equator, kind of like it was in the Ice Age, as far as that's where all the moderate, nice, human living, farming temperatures would be. I guess to shorten the question, do you think that weather patterns like we just had would eventually change that area where the cold is pushing down further, allowing them to grow different crops there? And if so, what's the odds on all of these WEF people and all of that planning for this? Because somebody just sent me an article that I hadn't thought about for a while, and I didn't know the name of it. And they said, have you heard about the 15-minute cities? And it sounded familiar, but I asked, they sent me a link. It's from Agenda 21, the World Economic Forum. And it talks about these little super cities where people are all cordoned off in these little areas where everything is 15 minutes from them. The doctor's 15 minutes, the grocery store's 15 minutes, the school's 15 minutes, the transit's 15 minutes, everything. They're all cramped in this little area. But I was just thinking, isn't that exactly what's going on in Shanghai and other places like that in China? It's like a 15-minute city, yeah, for convenience until they lock it down. Then it's a 15-minute lockdown.
Yeah. I lived in something like that. It was very convenient, but you could leave whenever you want, and it was in northern Taipei in a place called Linkou. It was exactly as you described, but it was on the outskirts near the beach, like 3 miles from the beach in northern Taiwan. Out near the airport, but up at the beaches, a lot of fishing villages. You go get fresh seafood and whatnot. Great connective rail to get back into main Taipei City, which was, like a 20-minute train ride down the way to get you back in the city, and then you could hop on their MRT system then and get around to the underground or whatever. But it was incredibly, incredibly easy to do everything. It was so easy to do that. Yeah, the doctor was there. The supermarket was there. They had like a Carrefour and a few other things. Fresh vegetable market was there. Parks were there. Everything was there that you could need within that same area. Now, you could ride a bike, too, around a little further than walking 15 minutes. But again, it was just like an extension of that, but it was at the edge of, so it served like, think about a compass where it might have north, south, east, west. Well, that 15-minute zones would be 4 of those encircled by a larger one, which would encapsulate those 5. That's what I noticed about the Linkou area up there was it seemed like there was a north, south, east, west section where each had its boundary edge where you definitely knew you were out of it. It was going back into like industry, or it was going back into, more farmish type, if you will, nothing developed, forest type of thing. And then it ended right there, and you knew you got to the end of it, like you literally knew. And then if you went back the other direction, it was all brand new again. And if you rode all the way to the other end, you come through that same section again where all the doctors and all the hospital and the train stations and these different things were. But the train was right in the center, the MRT, that train was right at the center of just the edge of all that. You could get to it easily. And I'd lived in that. It was interesting since I know exactly what you're talking about because I've had the experience. But the way it was there, it wasn't as is planned for these cities to be as much locked down as they could. But then what does that all lead up to? Forced rationing of food, I think. Because you're not going to go to all that trouble to put people in cities unless you're going to limit what can go in there, and that limitation will also include food. So maybe they're going to take the diet from the average 2,000, 2,500 calorie a day for an American, and then, you get into these 15-minute cities, and suddenly, no, you can only have 1,200 or 1,500 calories a day, and we'll deliver it to you, and we'll tell you what you're going to eat. Very much like a cafeteria at school or a prison or something where they give you it on a tray, but they'll just give you the fresh veggie, make you cook it at home, spend your time. You have to use your gas to cook it. You know what I mean? It's like your dime to cook it now. Burn up the energy to prepare your food. We're not going to do that for you. But anyway, that's it, man. Ransom, take us out for tonight. I think it's all going to really depend on this one thing here, the speed of 2020 versus 2023. On the fringe where we're talking tonight until it turns into sort of more of an awareness phase, and then that becomes the saturation phase, and then they move into action phase, and there's the chaos phase. So I don't know how fast that's going to move compared to the original onset when nobody ever heard of this thing. It was all brand new compared to, there's a new one. Oh, my gosh. Like the lightning fastness of, I think, this one. I don't know. Bring us out for the night. Thanks for joining.
Makes a lot of sense that they're trying to shove everybody in cities and make the grow zones in a faraway place. So, obviously we need to start taking control of everything.
David DuByne, Ransom, Godwin, signing off. Mini Ice Age Conversations. We will see you next week. Please share if you like our conversations. Ask others to join so like-minded people can come together.
Thank you for listening to Revolution